All right, so looking at this first slide. So it says the I can state. We're talking about conditional statements today. This is broken up into 2 days so that we can get the language down, okay? I can write conditional and biconditionals and find their truth values. So here's some new vocabulary through this lesson. We have biconditional, conclusion, conditional, contrapositive, converse, hypothesis, inverse, negation, truth table, and truth value. That's a lot. We are only covering part of that today, okay? So this is something you are already received a copy of. Hey, how's it going? Thank you. Got it. So you already received a copy of this. This sheet, do not lose it. Staple it in your book with 1-5 if you need to. It's going to be very helpful for your homework. It's going to be very helpful for studying for a test, okay? Keep it safe. All right, so you were supposed to skip B, so don't worry about that, but let's talk about the explore and reason. Now, all I wanted you guys to do was identify, are these statements true or are they false? So in this case, if it is raining, then it is spring. Who says true? Who says false? All right. Give me a counter example. Go ahead. If it rains in the summer, right? Rain is not just classified as springtime, despite the song, April showers bring rain flowers, right? But we have just seen rain in the summer. We see rain in the fall. We can even see rain in the winter. All right, if x and y are whole numbers, then their difference, x minus y, is a whole number. True or false? Who says true? Very good. So no counterexample needed. If water is heated, then it boils. Who says true? Who says false? Counterexample? Yeah, if it gets 150, it doesn't have to boil. How many of you have ever made like a cup of tea or some hot chocolate, right? Put it in the microwave. Does it boil? No, but does it still heat up? Absolutely. All right, if a triangle has a right angle, then it is a right triangle. Who says true? Who says false? Very good, it's true. All right, no counterexample needed. If your favorite color is blue, then you are a good speller. Who says true? Who says false? Counterexample. Yeah? Me too. Don't worry. We're both counterexamples there, okay? So, does that make sense? Any questions on those? All right, let's move on then. So, let's talk about this conditional statement. A conditional is an if-then statement that relates a hypothesis. The part that follows, if to a conclusion. The part that follows then. Conditionals can be represented as P to Q. So we would write this as if P, your hypothesis, then Q, your conclusion. Okay? So looking at example 1, write each statement as a conditional. You can register to vote if you are at least 18. In this case, the conclusion is always what's happening. Okay? So in this case, the conclusion is the registering to vote. Okay, so that's your Q. And your hypothesis is at least 18 years old. So that would be your P. Okay? So that's where that comes from. Sometimes the conclusion can come before the hypothesis, and that's okay. We have to identify which is which. So if I wanted to write this, I would write it with the hypothesis first. So the conditional would be, if you are at least 18 years old, then you may register to vote. Now, here's some common error that is actually very important. Remember that in everyday language, the hypothesis does not necessarily come before the conclusion. Okay? And that's what they're trying to show here. Any questions on that before I move on to the letter B? All right. So it says, write each statement as a conditional. A square must have 4 congruent sides. All right, so in this case, your hypothesis is you have a square. That is your P. And the 4 congruent sides, that is your Q. Okay? So this states, if a polygon is a square, there's your P, then it has 4 congruent sides, that is your Q. Questions on that? All right. Let's move on then. So on the try it, I think you're on what? Page 20? Is that true? Okay. Write each statement as a conditional. Identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. A triangle with all angles congruent is equilateral. Alberto can go to the movies if he washes the car. A has 2 possibilities. B only has 1. I want you guys to write those if-then conditional statements. I'll give you a minute. Show of hands if you are still working on this. Okay, give me another minute. All right, let's talk about the first one. Who's got 1 that they're confident in? You don't have to have both, you just need 1. Or are we lacking a little confidence today? Smidge? You just want to see him? All right, here's the first one. Provided it'll actually go. If a triangle has all angles congruent, then it is an equilateral triangle. That is 1. So that means the hypothesis is a triangle with all congruent angles, right? And the conclusion would be an equilateral triangle. Now, here's the second one. If a triangle is equilateral, then it has all congruent angles. Both work. So it all depended on this one, how you saw it. Okay? How about B? Go ahead.
If Alberto washes the car, then he can go to the movies.
Yep. There's only one way to do that. Alberto needs to wash that car to go see a movie, right? Questions on that? I'm trying to doctor these up a little bit so they look a little more interesting, if you couldn't tell. Kind of blah, right? No? Don't like the gifts? We can move on. Don't worry, I got something else planned for tomorrow. All right. Truth value of a statement is true or false according to whether the statement is true or false, respectively. So in this case, if a number is even, then it is divisible by 2. Would that be true or would that be false? It's true, right? There's no doubt about it. If it ends in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, it is divisible by 2. So that would be true. Now for letter B, it says if a quadrilateral has 2 pairs of congruent angles, then it is a parallelogram. But here's our counter example. We can have an isosceles trapezoid, which has 2 pairs of congruent angles. But is this a parallelogram? No. So therefore, it would be false. It has to work for every case. Now, this makes sense and persevere. To determine the truth value of a conditional, assume the hypothesis is true. This helps you a lot to determine if it's false or not by just saying, okay, if this part's true, does this work with this part? Okay. Then consider all possible options to determine whether the conclusion must also be true. So in this case, what I'm saying is a quadrilateral has 2 pairs of congruent angles. That is true without a doubt. And then it is a parallelogram? Well, no, we can provide that counterexample. Okay. Does that make sense? All right. What is the truth value of each conditional? Explain your reasoning. If a quadrilateral has a right angle, then it is a rectangle. Show of hands. True. Show of hands for false. Nice. It's false. What could be a counterexample for that? Go ahead. Could be a square. It could be any shape that just contains a right angle. A right triangle, right? That's not a rectangle. All right, if X is the midpoint of AB, then X lies on AB. True or false? Who says true? Who says false? It is in fact true. What does that mean for X, for A, X, and B? What are they called? What kind of points? Let's link to some vocabulary. Good. They're collinear points. Very good. Questions on this? Anything I can address before we move on to example 3? We're okay? Okay. All right, let's write and evaluate the truth of a truth value of a converse. Now, there are, if you guys look at your sheets, there are 4 different types, okay? I'm going to go back to the slide just to kind of show it real quick. If you guys look right here, that's why I said don't lose the sheet. The conditional is always the hypothesis, the conclusion. The wording is if the hypothesis, then the conclusion. The converse takes the hypothesis and conclusion and flips it. So you're saying if the conclusion, then the hypothesis. Okay? And these are things we're going to be discussing tomorrow. The inverse, the contrapositive, the biconditional. Okay? So it says, if you play the trumpet, then you play a brass instrument. All right. In this case, you have your hypothesis as playing the trumpet. There's your hypothesis. That's your p-value. And then playing the brass instrument is your conclusion. So here's your P. Here's your Q. All right. Now, if you look at this, what's happening is this conclusion is coming first in the if-then statement. The hypothesis goes here. So you're saying, so it says, if you play a brass instrument, then you play a trumpet. Now let's think about the truth values of this. If you play a trumpet, then you play a brass instrument. Would this be considered a true statement or a false statement? Show of hands, true. Show of hands, false. It is actually true because the trumpet is a brass instrument. So this would be true. Now, if you play a brass instrument, then you play a trumpet. Then you play the trumpet. Show of hands, true. Show of hands for false. Okay. Counter example. Huh? Trombone's a brass instrument. Tuba is a brass instrument, right? Just because you play a brass instrument does not necessarily mean it's a trumpet. So this is false. So just remember this is just a study tip. Take it with it what you will. It says to remember that the converse reverses the order. Remember that a conversation goes back and forth between two people. That's just their study tip. You guys make the call as to how you want to remember it. Okay. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So write and determine the truth value of the converse of the conditional. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to write the converse of each of these statements, and then I want you to identify if they are true or not, okay? So for letter A, it says, if a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it has 4 sides. Would that be true or false? Yeah, that'd be true. If 2 angles are complementary, then their angle adds up to 90. True or false? True. So we figured those out. Now I want you guys to write the converse and then determine if those are true or false. Go ahead. I'll give you a few minutes. You're back.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Show of hands who's still writing these. Okay. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at those the solutions first, and then we'll move on from there. So anybody got a converse for letter A? If a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it has 4 sides. Who's got the converse? Go ahead.
If a polygon has 4 sides, then it's a quadrilateral.
Very good. Polygon has 4 sides and is a quadrilateral. Nice job. How about letter B? If 2 angles are complementary, then their angle measures add up to 90. Go ahead. Perfect. If the measures of 2 angles add up to 90, obviously not. It's okay if it's a little different. Then they are complementary. Nice job. A, true or false? If a polygon has 4 sides and is a quadrilateral, true or false? Who says true? Who says false? Okay, we'll find out in a minute. How about B? If the measures of 2 angles add to 90, then they are complementary. Who says true? Who says false? They're both true. Okay. The converses work. Any questions? Okay. So you guys have on Google Classroom, it should be like at the top. I didn't get a chance to shift it down yet. it should be your homework should be posted. Okay, I think it's like 8 problems, and you're gonna need your chart for at least one of those problems. So keep it out, and then tomorrow we'll do the second half. So finish your homework and then work on something else for another class. Okay, but no phones until 2 minutes before the bell. Anu, you're not gonna have access to this just yet because you just got here today. So come here a sec. We're gonna talk about a few things. Okay. So I'm not going to make you take the 1113 quiz, but you are going to have to review the information so that you're ready for the test. I would start though with everything we did yesterday because you are going to have a quiz coming up, I think, next week on that stuff. And one thing I always do is I record the lessons. In fact, speaking of recording lessons. Okay, guys, have a great day.